When you're doing work in math class, it's always a good idea to keep an eye out for patterns. But when you think you see a pattern, you want to follow it with the question, will this always work? Now, here's a case in point. You may have noticed that when you switch the order of subtraction, the answers have opposite signs. I'll give you an example so you know what we're talking about. Back in first grade, you learned about takeaways or subtraction, and you learned that if you have 7 and you take away 5, you are left with 2. Now, about the time you get to middle school and you start introducing the idea of negative numbers, now you can talk about the problem 5 minus 7. And so if you have 5, take away 7, well, now we're picturing this on a number line, and we realize the answer to that is -2. And so you might ask yourself, it's the same answer, but with the opposite sign. Will this always happen? Why, yes, it will. Now the question becomes one of proof. How can we be sure it will always happen and that we're just not really lucky picking our examples? Well, here we go. This is a pretty elementary proof here. Now, one of the things I'm going to do here is instead of writing it as subtraction, I'm going to write it as adding the opposite. So instead of a minus b, I'm going to write it as a plus -b. And I'm going to do the same thing with this. This will be b plus -a. Now, there's a lot of different ways you can visualize what's about to happen on the right-hand side. I usually think of it as distributing the negative or distributing subtraction. You could also think of it as distributing multiplication by a -1. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. When I do that distribution, -1 times b is -b, and -1 times -a would give me +1a. Well, I don't need to write the 1 in front of the a. Now what I have here is an addition problem, and I know that addition is commutative. In other words, -b plus a is the same as a plus -b. And what we see is that we actually have the same expression as we have on the left. Now, this can come in handy when you're doing messy subtractions, say with polynomials. If you have to do them 2 different ways, if you were to switch the order of the subtraction, you would simply be switching the sign of every term in the answer. So a handy thing to know. Hope this video helped, and you know now that it will always work.